Welcome back to Galactic Survival Challenge, the show that proves civilization makes you soft. Admiral Vashi's three eyes gleamed under the studio lights, his purple tentacles writhing with what passed for enthusiasm among his species. I'm your host, Admiral Vashi, and joining me as always is our military consultant, General Kraftnog. General Kraftnog's rocky exterior cracked into what might have been a smile, if you squinted, and had a very generous imagination. Thank you, Vashi. For those just tuning in, let me explain our simple concept. We drop representatives from various species onto the most hostile planet we can find. Give them exactly 24 hours and see who can build the best shelter. No technology, no outside help, just raw survival instinct. That's right, Kraftnog. Vashi's voice carried the desperate energy of a show host whose ratings were circling the drain. And what a season we've had. Remember our contestant from the Tentacle Collective, Morden? The holographic replay materialized between them, showing a blob-like creature with dozens of writhing appendages. The footage showed Morden attempting to weave together some local vegetation, only to have the entire structure collapse within the first hour. By morning, the poor creature was huddled under a single leaf, shivering and crying what could only be described as purple tears. Ah yes, Morden. Kraftnog's gravelly voice held barely concealed amusement. Who somehow managed to tie himself into knots with his own tentacles and spent 14 hours trying to untangle himself. Fascinating to watch, really. Educational even. And then we had Moran from the Silicon Valley species. Vashi continued, pulling up another replay. This time, a crystalline rock-like being was shown attempting to eat through a mountain to create a cave. After 24 hours of non-stop chewing, Moran had managed to create a hole roughly the size of a closet and had worn down 3 sets of teeth in the process. The dedication was admirable, Kraftnog nodded sagely. The results were less so. I believe the medical team is still treating Moran for severe indigestion from all that granite. But perhaps our most memorable contestant was Judge Quintara from the Energy Collective. Vashi's tentacles practically danced with glee as the final replay showed a shimmering, translucent being of pure energy attempting to manipulate matter through sheer force of will. The footage was mostly just bright flashes and frustrated screaming in frequencies that made the recording equipment malfunction. Judge Quintara learned the hard way that being made of pure energy doesn't automatically grant you construction skills, Kraftnog observed dryly. In fact, I believe the final report stated that Quintara actually managed to make the environment more hostile by accidentally ionizing half the atmosphere. Vashi's expression grew increasingly desperate as he glanced at the ratings display floating just off camera. The numbers were not kind. Which brings us to today's challenge, folks. Our viewership has been, well, let's call it selective. Very selective. Extremely selective. So selective that my producer threatened to replace me with a dancing mushroom from Spore World 7. Hence why we need fresh ideas, Kraftnog interrupted, his tone suggesting this conversation had happened multiple times before, which is where Commander Tom Mali comes in. Tom, you have a suggestion for us? Commander Tom Mali, a slight being covered in what appeared to be blue fur, stepped forward nervously. His voice carried the tremor of someone who really didn't want to be here. Well, sir, I've been monitoring communications from various sectors, and there's been some chatter about a species called humans from a planet they call Earth. Humans? Vashi's middle eyes swiveled toward Mali while the other two remained focused on the camera. I never heard of them. Are they particularly advanced? Oh no, sir. Quite the opposite, actually. Mali consulted his data pad with the enthusiasm of someone reading a grocery list. They're classified as a Class C civilization, barely space-capable, still use combustion engines for most of their transportation. They've only just figured out basic nuclear fusion, and even then, they mainly use it to blow each other up. Perfect. Vashi clapped his tentacles together. Another primitive species for our viewers to watch fail miserably. What makes you think they'd be any different from our previous disasters? Mali shifted uncomfortably. Well, sir, there are some reports from the outer colonies. Apparently, when humans end up stranded or in survival situations, they have a tendency to adapt. There are stories about them building functional settlements out of debris, surviving in environments that should kill them, that sort of thing. Stories, Kraftnog snorted, which sounded like two boulders grinding together. Every species has stories about their survival capabilities. The Tentacle Collective claimed Morden was their best survivor. Look how that turned out. Exactly. Vashi's enthusiasm was returning. These humans sound like just another batch of primitives who think they're tougher than they actually are. It'll be perfect entertainment. The viewers love watching overconfident species get humbled by reality. Molly looked like he wanted to say something else but thought better of it. So, should I arrange for a human to be collected? Absolutely. Pick a random one. The more average, the better. We want this to be a fair representation of their species. Vashi was already envisioning the ratings boost. What was that planet called again? Earth, sir. Right, Earth. Commander Molly, I want you to grab the first human you find who looks reasonably healthy. Don't overthink it. These primitive species are all the same anyway. We'll call her... Let's see. Kraftnog consulted his own notes. The scanners picked up a designation, Amy Kowalski. She'll do perfectly. Amy Kowalski it is. Vashi turned back to the camera with renewed vigor. Ladies, gentlemen, and various non-binary energy configurations. Tomorrow we'll watch this Amy Kowalski attempt what three of our most celebrated species have failed to accomplish. Will she succeed where others have failed? Will she provide the entertainment value our show desperately needs? Will she help us avoid cancellation and the subsequent embarrassment of having to get real jobs? Probably not, Kraftnog added helpfully. Probably not indeed. Join us tomorrow for what promises to be another spectacular failure right here on Galactic Survival Challenge. 24 hours later, the command ship Inevitable Disappointment hovered in the upper atmosphere of Desolation Prime, the most creatively named hostile planet in their catalog. Inside the observation deck, Admiral Vashi settled into his comfort pod while technicians adjusted the camera feeds. All right, everyone, places. We're going live in 30 seconds. Vashi's tentacles fluttered nervously as he reviewed his notes. Remember, we need good footage of the primitive's inevitable breakdown for the highlight reel. General Kraftnog positioned himself at the tactical display, his rocky fingers drumming against the console. Environmental conditions are optimal for maximum suffering. Temperature is holding steady at -40 degrees. Wind speeds are gusting up to 60 miles per hour. Local wildlife includes acid-spitting slugs, territorial shadow cats, and those delightful exploding mushrooms from last season. Perfect. And our contestant? Commander Tom Molly glanced at his readings with barely concealed nervousness. Amy Kowalski has been sedated and is ready for deployment. Medical scans confirm she's a typical human, soft skin, inadequate body hair, no natural weapons or armor. She should be conscious by the time she hits the ground. Excellent. Quartermaster A, are you tracking all her vital signs? Quartermaster A, a spider-like being with too many eyes and an unsettling clicking voice, adjusted his monitoring equipment. All systems operational, Admiral. Heart rate, brain activity, body temperature, everything's being recorded. I've also got motion trackers on her so we can follow her pathetic wandering until she inevitably collapses. Wonderful. Deploy the contestant. The cargo bay doors opened with a mechanical hiss, and Amy Kowalski tumbled out in a standard-issue orange jumpsuit, in her unconscious form disappearing into the swirling clouds below. The camera drones immediately followed, streaming live footage back to the command ship. And we have contact with the surface. Vashi announced with theatrical enthusiasm. Let's see how our human handles her first moments on Desolation Prime. The main screen flickered to life, showing Amy sprawled face first in a patch of crystalline snow. For several minutes, she didn't move at all. Ooh, that's not looking good, Kraftnog observed with satisfaction. Unconscious longer than expected. I give her 15 minutes before hypothermia sets in. I'll take that bet. Vashi's eyes gleamed. 20 credits says she doesn't last 10 minutes. Look at her. No fur, no protective shell, no redundant organs. She's practically designed to die quickly. Quartermaster A's clicking intensified with what might have been laughter. Vital signs show she's regaining consciousness. Heart rate increasing. Brain activity resuming. Should be interesting to watch her panic response. Amy's eyes fluttered open. She pushed herself up slowly, shaking her head and blinking at the alien landscape around her. Then she just sat there. For a full 2 minutes, she remained perfectly still, apparently staring at nothing. There we go. Vashi slapped his tentacles together in delight. Classic primitive behavior. She's completely overwhelmed by the environment, probably paralyzed by fear. This is exactly the content our viewers expect. Her brain activity is spiking, Quartermaster reported, sounding puzzled. But it's not the pattern we usually see with panic or fear. It's more organized? Like she's processing multiple data streams simultaneously. Impossible. General Kraftnog scoffed. She's a primitive. They don't process data streams. They barely process single thoughts. Amy suddenly stood up, brushing snow off her jumpsuit. She turned in a slow circle, apparently examining her surroundings with the same casual interest someone might show when choosing produce at a market. Finally, some movement. Vashi rubbed his tentacles together. Now we get to watch her stumble around aimlessly before the local wildlife finds her. But Amy didn't stumble. Instead, she walked with purpose to a nearby cluster of dead trees and began examining the branches, testing their flexibility and breaking off several pieces of different sizes. What is she doing? Commander Mali leaned forward, frowning at his instruments. Why is she collecting those useless sticks? Probably trying to build a weapon, Kraftnog suggested. Primitives always think they can fight their way out of problems. Watch her try to stab an acid slug with a twig. Should be educational. Amy moved on from the trees to a rocky outcrop, where she began selecting stones of various shapes and sizes. She tested their weight, knocked them together to listen to the sound they made, and carefully arranged them in her growing collection. This is bizarre behavior, even for a primitive, Quartermaster clicked nervously. She's gathering materials with no apparent pattern. Random sticks, random rocks, and now is she smelling that moss? Indeed, Amy had knelt beside a patch of purple moss and was carefully examining it, even bringing small samples close to her nose. She nodded to herself and began harvesting specific sections while leaving others untouched. She's going to poison herself? Vashi declared confidently. Primitives always eat the wrong things. I've seen it happen dozens of times. Give her another hour and she'll be writhing on the ground, foaming at the mouth. Her selection process seems oddly systematic, Mali observed quietly. Almost like she knows what she's looking for. Nonsense. Kraftnog's voice boomed across the observation deck. She's a primitive from a Class C civilization. They don't know anything beyond basic tool use and fire making. Amy continued her methodical gathering, moving from location to location with what appeared to be a mental checklist. She collected bark from specific trees, certain types of stones, various plant materials, and even some of the local clay from a small creek bed. I'm starting a betting pool, Vashi announced, desperate to maintain some entertainment value. How long before she realizes this is hopeless and starts crying? I'm taking bets in increments of 10 minutes. But as the first hour passed, Amy showed no signs of despair. If anything, she seemed to be humming softly as she worked, occasionally talking to herself in what the universal translators rendered as cheerful commentary about her surroundings. This is highly irregular, Quartermaster reported, his multiple eyes blinking in sequence. According to my behavioral models, she should have attempted to signal for rescue by now, or at least shown signs of distress. Instead, her stress hormones are actually decreasing. Give it time, Admiral Vashi said, though his confidence was beginning to waver. She's still in the gathering phase. Wait until nightfall, when the real predators come out. That's when we'll get our entertainment. But even as he spoke, Vashi couldn't shake the feeling that something was different about this contestant. Something unsettling. Something that suggested maybe, just maybe, they had underestimated their latest primitive. Fast forward through the boring parts, Admiral Vashi commanded, waving a tentacle at the time-lapse controls. Let's see how quickly our primitive breaks down when the reality of her situation sets in. The holographic display accelerated, showing Amy's movements in rapid succession. What they saw made absolutely no sense. Wait. Go back to normal speed. General Kraftnog leaned forward, his rocky brow furrowing. Did she just eat that purple root without testing it first? The footage returned to normal speed, showing Amy casually chewing on what appeared to be a particularly toxic-looking tuber while continuing her work. She showed no signs of distress, nausea, or the violent death that should have followed within minutes. That's a desolation root. Commander Mali's voice cracked with disbelief. Those things are lethal to 97% of known species. Even our own military uses them as biological weapons. Maybe she has a delayed reaction? Quartermaster suggested hopefully, his multiple eyes tracking Amy's vital signs. Heart rate normal, respiration steady, brain activity actually increasing? That can't be right. Brandon Torres, a junior observer with annoyingly bright orange skin and an even more annoying habit of asking questions, raised his hand tentatively. Excuse me, sirs. Why is she talking to herself so much? Is that normal primitive behavior? Indeed, Amy had been maintaining a steady stream of conversation with apparently no one for the past 3 hours. The universal translator was picking up fragments. Okay, so if I angle this just right, and the wind's coming from the northeast, so I'll need to account for that. Definitely going to need more tinder, but those bark strips should work perfectly. She's having a psychological breakdown, Admiral Vashi declared with satisfaction. Isolation-induced psychosis. Very common in primitives. She'll be completely catatonic within the hour. But sir, Brandon persisted, she doesn't sound distressed. She sounds like she's planning something? Planning? Kraftnog snorted. Primitives don't plan beyond their next meal. She's clearly lost her mind. The time lapse resumed, and their confusion only deepened. Amy moved through the alien landscape with increasing confidence, seemingly knowing exactly which materials to gather and which to avoid. She constructed what appeared to be a simple lean to shelter, but even that raised questions. How did she know to position it that way? Brandon asked, pointing at the screen. Look, she's got it angled to block the wind from 3 directions, positioned to catch the morning sun, and she's even dug drainage channels around the base. That's actually pretty clever. It's coincidence, Vashi snapped, but his voice lacked its earlier conviction. Lucky guessing. Then Amy did something that made the entire observation deck fall silent. She gathered a small pile of dry grass, some bark shavings, and a few twigs. She picked up 2 pieces of wood and began rubbing them together with practiced, efficient motions. Within minutes, smoke began rising from the tinder pile. No, Commander Mali whispered. No. That's impossible. What's impossible? Brandon asked innocently. She just made fire. With sticks. No plasma torch, no fusion igniter, no molecular combustion chamber. Just sticks. How is that even possible? Quartermaster A's clicking reached a frantic pitch. Fire requires precise temperature control, atmospheric analysis, fuel mixture calculations. You can't just rub 2 pieces of organic matter together and expect combustion. Unless General Kraftnog's voice dropped to a suspicious growl. Unless they have some kind of hidden technology we're not detecting. That's it. Admiral Vashi slammed a tentacle against his console. She's cheating. Commander Mali, run a full spectrum scan. I want to know what kind of nanotech or bio-implants she's hiding. Mali's fingers danced across his controls, initiating the most comprehensive scans available. The results appeared on screen within seconds. No artificial technology detected, Admiral. No implants, no nanotech, no quantum enhancements. She's completely organic. Then how is she doing this? Vashi's three eyes were now focused entirely on Amy, who had moved on to crafting what appeared to be primitive tools from stones and sticks. Look at that. She's making cutting implements from random debris. That's not possible without industrial fabrication equipment? Brandon raised his hand again. Sirs, maybe humans are just good at this stuff. The senior officers turned to stare at him with expressions ranging from disbelief to outright hostility. Good at what stuff? Kraftnog demanded. Well, survival? Building things? Making fire? Brandon shrank back under their combined glare. I mean, maybe that's just what their species does. Absolutely not, Vashi declared firmly. We've studied dozens of primitive species. They all follow the same pattern: panic, despair, futile attempts at rescue signaling, then death or rescue. This human is exhibiting completely anomalous behavior. Maybe our classification system is wrong? Brandon suggested weakly. Our classification system, Kraftnog rumbled ominously, is based on thousands of years of xenobiological research. It is not wrong. As the day progressed, Amy continued to defy their understanding of primitive behavior. She wove baskets from local grasses, created cordage from plant fibers, and constructed what appeared to be a water filtration system using sand, charcoal, even cloth from her jumpsuit. She's making complex tools from garbage. Molly's voice was reaching panic levels. Look at that. She turned a piece of metal from her jumpsuit zipper into a functional knife blade. That requires metallurgical knowledge that shouldn't exist in a Class C civilization. And she keeps talking to herself, Quartermaster added nervously. Listen to this, if I can get the angle right on this notch, it should hold about 40 pounds of tension. That's engineering terminology. Maybe she's an escaped scientist? Brandon offered hopefully. We specifically selected a random civilian. Vashi's tentacles were writhing in agitation. Her records show she works in something called customer service, and her hobbies are listed as hiking and reading. Nothing that should prepare her for this. By evening, Amy had constructed what the aliens could only describe as a pathetically primitive shelter. It was a simple framework of wooden poles covered with bark and grass, with a stone-lined fire pit in front. To their eyes, it looked like exactly the sort of crude structure they expected from a failing primitive. There, Admiral Vashi pointed triumphantly at the screen. Look at that sad little hut. That's what we expected all along. Primitive construction, barely adequate materials, no advanced engineering principles whatsoever. She'll freeze to death by morning, Kraftnog agreed, his confidence returning. That flimsy structure won't provide adequate thermal protection. The local temperature drops to -60 after midnight. Finally, some normal, primitive failure. Vashi rubbed his tentacles together, set alarms for every 2 hours. I want to capture the exact moment when hypothermia sets in. That's the money shot our viewers are paying for. Brandon looked like he wanted to say something else, but wisely kept quiet. As night fell on Desolation Prime, the alien observers settled in to watch their contestants' inevitable demise, their confidence restored by the sight of her obviously inadequate shelter. After all, how much trouble could one primitive possibly cause? They were about to find out. Admiral Vashi's alarm tentacle twitched him awake at precisely 0600 hours, ship time. He stretched languidly in his comfort pod, anticipating the delicious moment when the cameras would reveal their contestant's frozen corpse. Nothing started the day quite like vindicated predictions and confirmed superiority. Morning, everyone, he called cheerfully to the observation deck. Time for the death watch. Commander Molly, bring up the camera feeds. Let's see how our little primitive fared during her first and final night on Desolation Prime. General Kraftnog rumbled to consciousness, his rocky hide scraping against his rest platform. I'm betting she made it 6 hours before hypothermia set in. Maybe 7 if she was particularly stubborn. You're both optimists, Quartermaster clicked from his monitoring station. Vital signs show she stopped moving around 0300 hours. It probably succumbed to exposure right on schedule. Brandon Torres, who had apparently stayed up all night monitoring the feeds, looked unusually pale even for his species. Sirs? You might want to look at this. Of course, of course. Vashi rubbed his tentacles together gleefully. Mali, main screen. Full resolution. I want to see every detail of our primitive's predictable failure. The main display flickered to life, showing the morning landscape of Desolation Prime. The camera panned across the location where Amy had built her sad little lean-to shelter the night before. The lean-to was gone. In its place stood a complete log cabin. The observation deck fell silent except for the gentle hum of life support systems and the sound of Quartermaster A's mandibles clicking in what might have been a system malfunction. That's not possible, Commander Mali whispered, his blue fur standing on end. The cabin wasn't just any cabin. It was a masterwork of primitive engineering, perfectly fitted logs sealed with what appeared to be mud and moss chinking, a stone chimney that rose precisely straight and was currently producing a thin column of smoke, windows made from woven branches that still allowed light while blocking wind, and a slanted roof designed to shed the morning snow that had fallen during the night. Someone switched the feeds. Admiral Vashi's voice cracked like a whip across the stunned silence. This is obviously the wrong location. Mali, check your coordinates. Mali's trembling fingers danced across his console. Coordinates confirmed, Admiral. Same location. Same timestamp. Same. This is impossible. Look around the cabin. General Kraftnog commanded, his voice shaking the observation deck's hull plating. The camera drones obliged, panning to reveal not just the impossible cabin, but an entire settlement. Neat garden plots had been laid out in rows, with what appeared to be fast-growing local plants already showing green shoots. A defensive perimeter of sharpened stakes surrounded the entire compound. A storage area filled with neatly organized supplies sat adjacent to the main structure. Even a primitive but functional latrine had been constructed downwind of the living area. This violates at least 47 laws of physics. Quartermaster A's clicking had reached frequencies that were causing the ship's universal translator to malfunction. You cannot construct a permanent settlement in 12 hours. The materials alone would require industrial fabrication equipment. She cheated. Admiral Vashi's tentacles were flailing wildly. She had to have cheated. Nobody builds a cabin overnight with hand tools. It's impossible. Wait, Brandon Torres said quietly. Look at the smoke from the chimney. Someone's inside. The camera feed switched to thermal imaging, confirming a single human-sized heat signature moving around inside the cabin. Through the woven branch windows, they could see Amy moving about casually, apparently preparing what looked like breakfast. She's alive, Mali breathed. Not only is she alive, she's thriving. Get me audio. Vashi screamed. I want to hear what she's doing in there. The audio feed crackled to life, revealing Amy's voice, cheerful and conversational. Okay, little guy, I know you want some of these berries, but you need to let me finish cooking first. I promise I'll share, but breakfast is important, you know? A small chirping sound responded to her words. She's talking to the local wildlife, Brandon observed with something approaching awe. And it's responding to her? The video feed confirmed it. A small, brightly colored bird was perched on Amy's shoulder, apparently engaged in active conversation with her. Occasionally, it would fly to different parts of the cabin, bringing her small items or simply keeping her company. She domesticated the local fauna. General Kraftnog's voice was barely above a whisper. In 12 hours, she built a permanent settlement and established diplomatic relations with the indigenous species. This is a system malfunction. Admiral Vashi was now hovering near the ceiling, his agitation causing him to float. Mali, run full diagnostics on all recording equipment. Check for temporal distortions, reality inversions, universe glitches, anything. All systems functioning normally, Admiral, Mali reported, though his voice suggested he desperately wished otherwise. No anomalies detected. No temporal disturbances. No indication of advanced technology. According to our instruments, Amy Kowalski accomplished all of this using locally available materials and primitive hand tools. Impossible. The voice boomed from the communication system, causing everyone to jump. Judge Quintara had apparently been monitoring the situation from the energy realm and was now manifesting as a shimmering presence on the observation deck. I demand a full investigation. This human has somehow violated the fundamental laws of construction, thermodynamics, and basic temporal mechanics. Your Honor, Brandon said hesitantly, what if she didn't violate anything? What if humans are just really good at building things? The silence that followed Brandon's suggestion was so complete it seemed to generate its own gravitational field. Look at the construction details, Brandon continued, apparently deciding to commit fully to his theory. The logs are fitted together using interlocking notches. The chimney uses a technique called corbelling to create a stable structure without mortar. The garden plots are positioned to maximize sun exposure and drainage. This isn't impossible engineering, it's just really good primitive engineering. Amy emerged from her cabin at that moment, carrying what appeared to be a perfectly cooked breakfast of local plants and what might have been eggs from some indigenous species. She sat on a hand-carved wooden chair on her front porch, the little bird settling on her knee as she ate. She built furniture, Quartermaster whispered. She built a chair, from wood, with no power tools. And look at the aesthetic design, Brandon added, warming to his theme. The proportions are pleasing to the eye, the materials blend harmoniously with the environment, and the overall layout shows an understanding of both functional and artistic principles. This isn't just survival, it's civilization. Amy looked up at that moment, apparently noticing one of the camera drones. She smiled and waved, then called out in a cheerful voice, "Good morning. I hope you don't mind, but I borrowed some of your local materials. I'll be happy to pay you back or teach you how to do this if you're interested." The observation deck erupted into chaos. Alarms began blaring, officers started shouting contradictory orders, and somewhere in the background, Judge Quintara was demanding an immediate review of the entire classification system for primitive species. Admiral Vashi slowly sank to the floor, his tentacles going limp with shock. "She's offering to teach us," he mumbled. "The primitive is offering to teach us." They were beginning to realize that maybe primitive wasn't the right word after all. "Replay everything." Admiral Vashi commanded, his voice carrying the desperate edge of someone clinging to the last shreds of his sanity. "Every second, every frame, every pixel. There has to be an explanation." The next 6 hours were a masterclass in obsessive analysis. The alien observation team dissected Amy's 24 hours on Desolation Prime with the intensity of scientists studying a new form of physics-defying matter. There, Commander Molly pointed frantically at the screen. Hour 3, timestamp 1542. She's selecting those specific logs. How did she know which trees would provide the straightest timber? Pattern recognition, Brandon Torres offered quietly. Look at her eye movements. She's examining the grain, checking for knots, testing the weight distribution. She's evaluating dozens of variables simultaneously without any instruments. That's impossible. General Kraftnog slammed a rocky fist against his console. Optimal material selection requires computational analysis, stress load calculations, molecular density scans. You can't just look at a tree and know its structural properties. Brandon pulled up another segment of footage. Watch this part. See how she's testing the flexibility of each branch before cutting it? She's bending them, listening to the sound they make, even smelling the wood to check for rot or insect damage. She's using biological sensors we didn't even know humans possessed. Quartermaster A's clicking had evolved into what could only be described as nervous laughter. Look at timestamp 2217. She's working in complete darkness, but her productivity hasn't decreased at all. How is she maintaining precision without visual input? Touch, sound, and spatial memory, Brandon explained, though he sounded as amazed as the rest of them. Watch her hands. She's feeling for the wood grain, listening to the sound of her tools, using muscle memory to maintain consistent angles. She's turned her entire body into a precision instrument. Admiral Vashi stared at the footage in growing horror. Show me the cabin construction sequence again. All of it. In real time. What they saw defied every principle of construction they understood. Amy worked with a fluid efficiency that seemed to border on precognition. She cut each log to the exact length needed before measuring the space it would fill. She prepared foundation stones while the walls were still being planned. She gathered chinking materials while the logs were still green trees. It's like she can see the finished structure before she builds it, Molly whispered. Every action serves multiple purposes. Every cut, every placement, every decision builds toward the final result with no wasted motion or materials. That's impossible. Vashi's tentacles were knotted with stress. Construction requires sequential phases. Foundation, then walls, then roof, then finishing. You can't do everything simultaneously. Unless, Brandon said slowly, your brain can hold the entire project in active memory while optimizing for multiple variables in real time. Look at this. While she's notching logs for the walls, she's also positioning them to create natural shelving, ventilation channels, and structural supports for the roof she hasn't built yet. General Kraft Nog pulled up the ecological data. Explain this then, Junior Genius. How did she know which local plants were edible? Our xenobiology database lists 47 different species in that area, 32 of which are toxic to carbon-based life forms. Brandon highlighted Amy's plant selection process. She's using multiple identification methods: visual pattern recognition, chemical analysis through smell and taste, behavioral observation of local wildlife, even testing plant reactions to environmental stimuli. She's essentially conducting real-time biological research using only her native senses. But she never made a mistake. Quartermaster A's voice cracked with disbelief. Not once. Every plant she selected was not only edible but nutritionally optimal. The probability of that happening by chance is effectively zero. It wasn't chance, Brandon realized, his orange skin paling further. She has pattern recognition algorithms running in her biological neural network. She's unconsciously processing thousands of environmental variables and making optimal decisions without realizing she's doing it. Admiral Vashi slowly turned to face his team, his three eyes unfocused with something approaching existential terror. Do you understand what this means? The observation deck fell silent. We've been calling them primitive, Vashi continued, his voice barely above a whisper. But they don't need our technology because they've internalized capabilities that we require massive computational systems to achieve. They're not primitive, they're integrated. Their entire species functions as biological supercomputers, Molly added, the implications dawning on him. Every human brain is a quantum processing unit capable of real-time environmental analysis, predictive modeling, and optimization protocols that would strain our best artificial intelligence systems. And they think this is normal, General Kraftnog rumbled, staring at the screen where Amy was casually teaching her bird friend to fetch specific types of berries. To them, building a permanent settlement overnight is just camping. Judge Quintara's energy signature flickered with what might have been nervous laughter. We've been testing them with survival challenges. But from their perspective, we've been giving them recreational activities. Brandon cleared his throat nervously. Sirs, I've been thinking about our classification system. Maybe we need to reconsider what we mean by advanced civilization. Admiral Vashi's tentacles went completely limp. Brandon, I'm beginning to think our entire understanding of technological development might be fundamentally flawed. How so, sir? We assumed that advancement meant replacing biological capabilities with artificial ones. But what if true advancement means enhancing biological capabilities to the point where artificial assistance becomes unnecessary? The implications of this realization settled over the observation deck like a heavy blanket of dread. They weren't observing a primitive species struggling to survive. They were watching a naturally evolved superorganism demonstrate why it had never needed their definition of civilization in the first place. Admiral Vashi sat in his command chair, staring at the communication console with the expression of someone contemplating the heat death of the universe. His three eyes blinked in sequence, a nervous tic he'd developed over the past hour of existential crisis. "Molly," he said quietly, his voice lacking its usual theatrical flair. "Send a message to Network Command. Tell them we're canceling Galactic Survival Challenge. Permanently." End. Commander Molly's blue fur was still standing on end from shock. "Sir, should I give them a reason? Tell them we've discovered that our entire premise was fundamentally flawed from the beginning. Tell them that we've been accidentally testing the wrong species in the wrong way for the wrong reasons." Vashi paused, then added with a bitter laugh, "Tell them we've been running a comedy show when we thought we were producing educational content." General Kraftnog shifted his massive rocky frame, causing the deck plates to groan in protest. "What about the human? Do we just leave her there?" "Oh, we're definitely going to talk to her," Vashi replied grimly. "I have some very important questions that need answers. Molly, open a communication channel." The main screen flickered to life, showing Amy sitting on her hand-carved porch, apparently braiding some kind of rope from local plant fibers. Her bird friend was perched on her shoulder, occasionally offering commentary in chirps that Amy seemed to understand perfectly. "Hello." Amy looked up at the camera with a bright smile. "Oh good, you're back. I was wondering if anyone was going to check in. How's everything going up there?" The entire observation deck exchanged glances filled with barely controlled hysteria. "Ms. Kowalski," Admiral Vashi began carefully, "we need to ask you about your construction project." "Oh, this?" Amy gestured casually at her impressive settlement. "Yeah, it turned out pretty well. I mean, it's nothing fancy, just basic camping stuff. I would have built something nicer, but I wasn't sure how long I'd be staying, so I kept it simple." The silence that followed this statement was so complete that the ship's life support systems seemed unnaturally loud. "Simple?" Brandon Torres squeaked. "Well, yeah," Amy continued, apparently oblivious to the psychological damage she was inflicting. "I mean, it's just a basic log cabin. No insulation, no plumbing, no electrical systems. Pretty primitive, really. I didn't even have proper tools, so I had to make everything by hand." Quartermaster A's clicking had devolved into what sounded like mechanical sobbing. "Ms. Kowalski," General Kraftnog managed to rumble, "you built a permanent settlement with integrated infrastructure in 12 hours, using only primitive hand tools, in sub-zero temperatures, while surrounded by hostile wildlife." Amy blinked in confusion. "Yes? Is that unusual for your species?" "I mean, 12 hours is a bit rushed. But it's not like I was trying to win any construction awards. I just needed somewhere warm and dry to sleep." "Rushed," Commander Molly repeated faintly. "She considers 12 hours rushed for building a cabin. How long does it normally take you?" Amy asked with genuine curiosity. But the aliens looked at each other in panic. The honest answer was that none of them actually knew how to build anything without industrial fabrication equipment, computer-assisted design, and automated construction systems. We don't typically build things by hand," Vashi admitted reluctantly. "Oh." Amy's face lit up with understanding. "You're more of a high-tech civilization. That makes sense. Different approaches to the same problems, right? Though I have to say, there's something really satisfying about working with your hands. Very meditative." Judge Quintara's energy signature flickered with what might have been a nervous breakdown. "Ms. Kowalski, what you accomplished should be impossible according to our understanding of construction physics, materials science, and temporal mechanics." Amy tilted her head thoughtfully. "Well, I mean, it's not really that complicated. You just need to understand load distribution, thermal dynamics, and basic engineering principles. Plus a little common sense about working with natural materials." She paused, then added helpfully, "I could teach you if you want." The offer hung in the air like a photon torpedo aimed at their collective sanity. "Teach us?" Vashi whispered. "Sure. I mean, it's not rocket science or anything, just basic survival skills. Where I come from, most people learn this stuff as kids. Camping, hiking, building forts in the woods, that sort of thing. Amy's enthusiasm was growing. It's actually really fun once you get the hang of it. Brandon Torres raised a trembling hand. Ms. Kowalski, when you say most people learn this, how many humans can do what you just did? Oh, probably most of them. I mean, I'm not particularly skilled or anything. My friend Jake back home, now he's really good at this stuff. He once built an entire workshop in a weekend using nothing but hand tools and lumber from his own property. Amy paused thoughtfully. And my grandmother could build furniture that was so good it lasted for generations. She always said modern people had gotten soft, relying on machines for everything. The observation deck was now filled with the sound of various alien species experiencing psychological distress in their native languages. Your entire species, General Kraftnog said slowly, considers this level of construction ability to be normal? Basic, really, Amy confirmed cheerfully. I mean, there are specialists who are way better at it than me. Carpenters, engineers, architects, that sort of thing. They can build amazing stuff. But yeah, most humans can throw together a decent shelter if they need to. It's kind of a survival thing, you know? Admiral Vashi buried his head in his tentacles. Molly, make a note for the permanent record. We are never, under any circumstances, to underestimate a species that refers to architectural engineering as basic camping stuff. Noted, sir, Molly replied weakly. Amy leaned forward with interest. Hey, since we're talking, do you guys need help with anything? I noticed your ship has some interesting design features, but there might be some structural improvements that could increase efficiency. And that artificial gravity system sounds like it's working pretty hard. There are some natural approaches that might take some of the load off. The collective nervous breakdown of the alien command crew was interrupted by Quartermaster A's frantic clicking. She's offering to improve our technology, with primitive methods. They're not primitive, Brandon Torres said quietly. That's what we keep getting wrong. They're not primitive at all. They're something else entirely. Amy smiled brightly. Well, if you change your mind, just let me know. Oh, and thanks for the interesting challenge. This was actually pretty fun. Do you guys do other contests? Maybe something a bit more advanced next time? Admiral Vashi looked at his crew, then back at Amy, then at his crew again. Finally, he managed to croak out, more advanced? Yeah, this was nice for a relaxing day, but I'd love to try something that really pushes the limits, you know? Maybe a multi-story building project? Or something with complex infrastructure integration? Amy's eyes sparkled with enthusiasm. I've always wanted to try building a suspension bridge. The communication channel went silent as every alien on the observation deck simultaneously fainted. When they eventually recovered, they found a new message logged in their permanent records. Species classification update. Humans are not primitive. Humans are not advanced. Humans are something far more terrifying. They are competent. Recommend avoiding all future contact until we figure out what that means for the rest of the galaxy. And somewhere in the ship's archives, a new motto appeared in the official documentation: never underestimate a species that calls architecture basic camping stuff. The show was over. But something told Admiral Vashi that their real education about humans had just begun. Far below on Desolation Prime, Amy Kowalski was already sketching plans for a greenhouse, and completely unaware that she had just accidentally conquered an entire civilization without firing a single shot.